That is your cue. We're now in public session. I'm just going to enable the audio transcription on the bottom. Members of the Board of Trustees Committee on Fiscal Affairs, please respond present when you hear your name. Chairperson Ferrer.
Here.
Vice Chairperson Mojica.
Present.
Great. Trustee Sunshine.
Here.
Trustee Berger.
Present.
Trustee Cortez Vasquez is absent and excused. Trustee Thompson.
Present.
Professor Verzani.
Present.
Great. Professor Benton, I'm not sure if I saw you.
He's unavailable.
Okay, no problem. The student representative, Alexis Fisher, I think I saw you. Hi, Alexis. And Nicole Agu, the other student, the alternate, I don't think I see. Okay, Trustee Bacant. We know you're there. No Friday classes. Trustee Burke.
Present.
There you are. Okay, great. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Can we have a call of the roll of the members of the Chancellor's office?
You want to do that now? Sure.
Why not?
Members of the Chancellery and other invited guests, please respond present when you hear your name. Chancellor Matos Rodriguez.
Present.
General Counsel and Senior Vice Chancellor for Legal Affairs, Derek Davis. I think I saw you.
Present.
pop on.
Present.
The Executive Vice Chancellor and University Provost, Jose Luis Cruz.
Present.
And the Executive Vice Chancellor and Chief Operating Officer, Hector Batista.
Present.
Great. The Senior Vice Chancellor, Matt Sapienza.
Present.
There you are. And Senior Vice Chancellor, Glenda Grace.
Present.
President Carol Mason has joined us.
Present.
Great. And Christina Chiappa, the Deputy Chief Financial Officer, is she joining us today, Matt?
No.
Okay. And Catherine Abata, the University Executive Budget Director. I wasn't sure if she, there you
Present.
are. Hi, Kathy. How are you?
Hi, Gail. Good. How are you?
Good. And Gwen Perlman is also joining us. She's the University Director of the Capital Budget and Finance.
Hello.
Great.
Okay, thank you, Gail.
Yep.
We have a quorum. This is a special meeting of the Committee on Fiscal Affairs. Accordingly, I'm calling it to order. On March 7, 2020, Governor Cuomo issued an executive order, Executive Order 202, declaring a state of emergency COVID-19 crisis. On March 13, Governor Cuomo issued Executive Order 202.1, which included a suspension of law. Am I still on?
Yeah, of course.
Oh, okay, good. I'm having a technical difficulty
Okay.
here.
The only thing is your screen is off.
Yes,
We
I
just-
know.
Okay. Just want to make sure we're all good.
Thank you. Let me try to get out of whatever silliness this is.
Do you want me to finish reading this part?
Would you please?
Absolutely.
You look like a Star Wars character.
Yes, allowing the attendance of meetings telephonically or other similar service. Article 7 of the Public Officers Law, to the extent necessary to permit any public body to meet and take such actions authorized by the law without permitting in public, in-person access to meetings, and authorizing such meetings to be held remotely by conference, call, or similar service, provided that the public has the ability to view or listen to such proceeding, and that such meetings are recorded and later transcribed. In accordance with the executive order, this board meeting is being held via video conference with a live stream found at the Cuny Board of Trustees website. Closed captioning can be seen on the bottom of your screen. A copy of the calendar, the agenda, is also available online at the Cuny Board of Trustees website. Additional items may be added during the meeting, and as a reminder, please mute your audio so we can ensure that everyone can hear. And we've now already taken the roll call for the Chancellery, and I'll turn it back
Thank
to
you,
you,
Gail.
Freddie.
Let's turn to the item requiring a vote today. Given that all board members are participating via Zoom, and we're unable to see everyone at once, I'll announce the resolutions, or I'll ask the secretary to read the resolutions and ask for members to respond only if you'd like to abstain or oppose an item. Otherwise, your vote will be recorded as a yes vote. If you're voting no or abstaining, please state your name and vote. Additionally, if you wish to second the item or have any questions, please state your name first for the record, and let's try to avoid speaking over one another. The item on the agenda is action item 1A1, the approval of the fiscal year 2021-2022 budget request. And now I'll call on Executive Vice Chancellor and Chief Operating Officer Hector Batista and Senior Vice Chancellor and CFO Matt Sapienza to provide further background.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the committee for holding this special meeting of the Fiscal Affairs Committee. Now that Governor Cuomo has announced his budget, I am pleased to be here with my colleagues to discuss our budget request for fiscal year 2022. I'm sure you will agree with me, last year was an unusual year, to say the least, for all of us. The challenges we encounter continue to affect everything that we do. It continues to play a role in our future plans. During this budget process, the constant theme that we have heard along with SUNY is that our request should be modest and position us to meet the challenges we face as a result of the pandemic. Because of CUNY's extensive footprints in the city and the state, it is imperative that we support New York recovery from COVID-19 pandemic, and we serve to bolster the economic resurgence of the city. We need to work in partnership with the state and the city to develop and provide a meaningful path forward for all of our stakeholders. So let's talk a little bit about this funding cycle. We're proposing programs that will address the critical challenges that we have to face. At the direction of the Chancellor, in partnership with our provost, we have identified innovative programs and initiatives to support our students. We will have the opportunity to talk about these programs in more detail with our provost, Jose Luis Cruz. But let me give you some high-level sense of the key investment areas. We start with student well-being. We plan to further leverage technology and expand capacity to provide a variety of mental health services, resources for our students as they navigate a great financial and personal loss. Our next priority is workforce development to support the critical needs to educate and train state and city workers. Our workforce programs are focused on building connections with private industry. Our next priority is nursing programs in the Cuny School of Medicine. With the coronavirus disproportionately affecting minority communities, we're educating and advancing careers for future medical and workers that come from those communities that are being affected. And finally, the priority area, enhancing diversity and advancing racial justice. We are creating access to advanced education, economic opportunities that can raise lower income students from Black, Latinx, and Asian communities, and ensure that students have access to diversity, culture aware, and highly effective full-time faculty. Now I would like to turn it over to Matt Sapienza, who's going to walk you through the operating budget request. Matt?
Thank you, Hector, and good afternoon, everyone. We'll start with the operating budget request. And on this slide, we have a summary of what our current appropriation is for our current fiscal year 21. This slide is broken out by senior colleges and community colleges. And you can see the funding sources in the current year for state operating support, for city operating support, how much is funded by fringe benefits. The senior college amount is funded by the state, $868 million, and $283 million funded by the city for the community colleges. Our opportunity programs, SEEK and College Discovery. Tuition and financial aid is there as well, $1.2 billion for senior colleges and $386 million for community colleges. And then programs supported by fee income and tuition. These are mostly adult and continuing ed and funds supported by the student technology fee. So our total budget in the current year on the operating side is a little over 2.8 billion for the senior colleges and a little over $1 billion for the community colleges. And in this request, as our chief operating officer said, due to the pandemic and the fiscal situations and the challenges that we're all facing and that the state and city are facing, this is a modest request. We're asking for the state, for the senior colleges, a little less than $30 million, 29.7, and from the city for the community colleges, 48.1, which would bring our total budget to a little under 2.9 billion for the senior colleges and a little over 1.1 million for the community colleges. So we'd put our budget at about $4 billion for next fiscal year 22. So we talked about the request items, 29.7 for the senior colleges, 48.1 for the community colleges. The items are lined out here, and we'll talk a little bit about them in the next few minutes. Prioritizing student mental health, the nursing pipeline program, strengthening our workforce development programs, improving equity and access through accelerating Cuny's online presence, enhancing diversity and advancing racial justice, meeting the need resource centers, expanding our successful Cuny Core program, creating adult college navigators, and providing funding for the Cuny School of Medicine. The last item here, community college revenue relief. As I know you're all aware, the community colleges have been particularly hit hard by the pandemic. Their enrollment for fall was down a little over 14%. And it was pretty consistent among our community colleges. Our community colleges were all down between 12 and 18%. So it wasn't that we had great losses at two of them and the others were stable. They were all down. And that was a nationwide trend for community colleges and certainly a statewide trend here in New York. So the community colleges have been hit especially hard by the coronavirus. And our students, have not been able to continue their studies at the community colleges due to losing their jobs or their families losing their jobs or dealing with illness themselves. And so we're seeking revenue relief to help fill that gap of tuition revenue going down as a result of enrollment losses. So let's talk about these items, and we'll talk about student well-being. And in our budget request, which I know the document was shared with you all, but that has the details on all of these programs, but prioritizing student mental health. This was something that we had targeted last year in our budget request because we knew it was a very significant need in our university. We were very proud to use $5 million of our CARES money for student mental health. But what we're asking for here would be to provide access to mental health resources for our students. Certainly, our entire request is very COVID-centric and responding to COVID. And that's what we would really want to focus on here. Students that are feeling housing and food insecurity as a result of COVID, job losses, illness. The second item, meeting the need resource centers. I think as you're all aware, we've had a successful program at Cuny and mostly in our community colleges through a partnership with Single Stop. And even though that partnership has ended, we have continued to provide resource centers at mostly our community colleges and a few of our senior colleges. I know President Mason is here at John Jay, and they have a center as well. And really what we'd like to do here is really expand those resource centers that we currently have and create resource centers at the colleges that don't have it, so that our students kind of have a one-stop shop that they can go to find out the resources that are available to them and get some assistance from experts at the campus. And then lastly, we would develop a system-wide strategy to address food insecurity, housing instability, and providing our campuses with these services. And I want to just acknowledge our University Provost and Executive Vice Chancellor Jose Luis Cruz and his team for the terrific work they did in crafting this request and in working on these initiatives and providing the details and the goals for what these initiatives would be. The next item is workforce development. And again, this was something that we have been very focused on. And our Chancellor has made a priority since he has been here from May 2019. And really what we'd like to do now as a result of the pandemic is double down on those efforts and forge connection with private industry to find out what type of skills they're looking for in each of their industries and work with them to try to develop curriculum that'll be helpful and provide our students with the skills that they need to succeed in those industries, but also to create career pathways for our students so that as they're getting their degrees and even while they're still here at Cuny, that there are job opportunities for them and internships opportunities. And speaking of internship opportunities, our Cuny Core program, which has been incredibly successful, we're looking for funds in this request to expand those opportunities for students in community colleges and also to provide opportunities for students in their first and second years so they get that valuable career experience and again have a pathway to better pathway to jobs as they graduate. Last item in this category, adult learners. We know that there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of adult learners in New York that have some college credits but don't have their degree yet. And we want to try to bring them back, and not only bring them back, but when they come back, to provide the supports that they need in order to be successful. And one of the things that we would like with additional funding is to create college navigators. So these would be trained college advisors who would be able to be that personal guide for those adult learners when they come back to our system, to provide them with the logistical knowledge, the academic guidance, the financial advice on how to pay for their college degree. All of those things would be something that the college navigators would help the adult learners with. Next, nursing in the School of Medicine. I think we all have been so amazed by the work that nurses throughout New York and the country have done during the pandemic, putting themselves on the line to help address this public health crisis. And we know that as we get through this crisis, there's going to be shortages in nursing throughout New York. And we really want the university to be the pipeline to have additional nurses come out and to fill those shortages in nursing. We have 14 colleges at Cuny that have nursing programs. And one of the things that we want to create, and as part of our request, is this nursing pipeline program that would direct high school students who are interested in nursing and other healthcare fields into the community college level nursing programs. And that would be a pathway for them once they finish their community college studies to move right into a Cuny senior college for their baccalaureate studies in nursing as well. And so we think this would be a terrific pipeline from high school, community college, senior college to the workplace. We want to improve our clinical placement support systems that we currently have to improve better matches between our students who do graduate and clinical sites. We know that part of having strong nursing programs is improving the infrastructure and having up-to-date equipment. We want to have more online learning opportunities for nursing simulations, training models, and methods where students can collaborate across health fields. And then lastly, as our Chief Operating Officer mentioned earlier, the Cuny School of Medicine. The Cuny School of Medicine graduated its first class this past year in 2020. And thanks to a proclamation that was given by the governor for all doctoral students from doctoral programs throughout New York State, our graduates from the Cuny School of Medicine were allowed upon graduation to go out into the fields and to begin immediately working in helping combat the pandemic. And we're really proud of that. We're really proud of the work that the School of Medicine has done since it was opened. It is unique in serving urban communities and for recruiting unrepresented minorities for careers in medicine and for practicing in these underserved areas. And so we think that this is a unique opportunity, given the healthcare crisis, to really focus on the wonderful work that's going on at this school and to seek additional support for the School of Medicine. And then the last category, access, diversity, and advancing racial justice. One of the things we'd like to do here is improve equity and access by really strengthening CUNY's online presence. And one of the things that's described in our budget request is this CUNY Online Accelerator that would expand the capacity of all of our 25 campuses. And what we would use as the accelerator is our terrific School of Professional Studies. And I hope you all saw the news earlier in the week where U.S. News and World Report ranked School of Professional Studies online programs within the top 2% in the entire country. So again, something we're really proud of, and they have really developed an expertise in online programming. And so they would be used in helping our other colleges in the CUNY system to develop their online presence as well. We want to make sure that we continue to build on our diversity everywhere in the university, but certainly in our faculty ranks. And so we're asking for funding to hire 80 additional faculty. We were very pleased several months ago to receive a grant through the Mellon Foundation to expand studies in ethnic studies throughout the university, to expand programs, I should say, in ethnic studies. And so we're asking for support to leverage those funds and continue to build on Black race and ethnic studies throughout the university. And lastly, community college support. As I mentioned earlier, community colleges have an acute need from this pandemic. Community college students have an acute need. And so we're looking for specific support for our community colleges. So that summarizes the operating request. The last item that we want to touch on as part of the operating request is the predictable tuition policy. The predictable tuition policy was originally put in place in 2011. That was extended in 2017, and the predictable tuition policy legislation is expiring on July 1st, 2021. And so we do support the extension of the predictable tuition policy to provide additional flexibility, to provide predictability to our students and their families so that they can plan for their time here at CUNY, and to avoid what happened prior to 2011 in New York State, which is there were large tuition spikes that students could not plan for. And it really placed students at a disadvantage depending on what year they enrolled in our university, whether they were subject to those large spikes or not. And so we do support the extension of predictable tuition policy. We were very pleased that the governor included that extension in his recently issued executive budget. And so that is part of our request as well. So with that, we're now going to move on to the capital plan, and I'm going to turn it back to our Chief Operating Officer, Hector Batista.
Thank you, Matt.
Excuse me just one second. Hector,
Sure.
there may be questions or comments on the operating part of this
Okay.
as opposed to the capital part of this. And is the committee okay with splitting this up right now and just dealing with discussion with questions on the expense part?
Fine here.
Okay.
That's fine.
With everybody's then consent, let's start a discussion and questions on our operating budget. Any questions? Comment? Don't be shy.
Hi, this is Student Representative Alexis Fisher.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Yes, thank you for that presentation on the budget. My first question of a few is in regards to the current projected TAP gap, because we know that the TAP gap affects different campuses in different ways, depending on the amount of enrollment or types of students that are enrolled in the colleges or community colleges. So I'm wondering if we have either like the documents that we could look at to see how each campus is being affected by the TAP gap, as well as if there is a gap in the Excelsior scholarship and how that is predicted to affect students. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks, Alexis, for raising that issue. Yeah, the TAP gap, we certainly can provide information to you and your colleagues in the University Student Senate, campus by campus, about what the TAP gap is. The TAP gap only exists at the senior colleges. Our community college tuition has been frozen for 4 years in a row now. And so our community college tuition is less than the maximum TAP award. So there's no gap at the community colleges. But at the senior colleges, there is a gap. For the current year, a total $78 million, which was about the same it was last year, because we did not have a tuition increase in this academic year. And so again, we can provide you that information as well. For Excelsior, there is also a gap, but it's very small, nowhere near the amount. It's in the single digit millions, and we can give you those numbers as well.
Excuse me, Matt, 2 points. One, this is not only a question for students and their representatives, but in their capacity as members of this committee, there's a question for all of us. So I'd appreciate that answer coming to all of us. And the other thing is,
Of course, absolutely.
what is the answer on the TAP gap?
The TAP gap for the current year is $78 million at the senior colleges. Those are funds that the colleges, do not receive as revenues in terms of TAP payments. TAP is payments are capped at the maximum award. Our tuition currently at the senior colleges per year is $6,930 per year. The maximum TAP award, I believe, is $5,165. So we have about that $1,700 to $1,800 gap that's not filled by TAP, and we have to cover internally at the university.
And how have we been covering it in past fiscal years?
It comes off the top of our budget. So in terms of when we look at our overall budget and we look at how much revenues are going to come in, that $78 million comes right off the top of our overall, $3.8 billion appropriation. We just take that $78 million off the top and know that we're not going to be receiving it. And so it's been managed in that way.
To the student representative, is that answer helpful?
Yes, that answer is helpful. And I guess the question is always, how will we close that TAP gap to ensure equity across campuses?
Well, I think the CFO just gave you an indication of how it's been closed in the past. There is no sense that that will change going forward, is there?
No, as tuition has been going up at the senior colleges, the TAP gap grows, and we've been increasing tuition. This year there was no tuition increase, but in the prior 3 years we had increases of $200 a year, and that increased the TAP gap by about $8 million per year. And so we've been at 78 for the last 2 years, and we've been managing that again through just taking it off the top of our allocations. And so, it's again something we'll continue to monitor and plan for.
Okay. Is there another question?
I'd like to ask one if I could.
Professor Bazzani.
Last year when we went through this, we were told that the budget request is a statement of values. And I find that it would have been of more value to me had we asked for more than 80 faculty lines in a period of time where we lost 2% of the full-time faculty. It's not that I'm expecting to get a line item allocation for 80 lines or 200 lines, but we asked for more last year, and we lost significantly more than 80 full-time faculty lines in the past year. So I would have appreciated seeing that. Often it's counterbalanced by efficiencies in the administrative operations of the university. I didn't see that as one of the sort of commitments of the budget request that's been in the past. So it's too late to change it, but I would have appreciated seeing it.
Well, yeah, and no, thanks, Professor Bazzani, for raising that. I just want to say that in previous budget requests, you're correct. that we've usually included the addition of full-time faculty. But as we said at the beginning of the presentation, this is a very different year. We are in a public health crisis. We're in a financial crisis. There's a ton of uncertainty about what our fiscal situation is going to be for next year. And we were trying to address that as part of this request and make this very focused on a student-centric and COVID-centric type of request. So we did bring our request down significantly this year. You see the amounts there is, a total of $77 million. Usually it's much, much higher. It's 3 or 4 times that amount. And we did that to try to be mindful of the financial uncertainty that we and the state and the city and federal government are all feeling right now. And so the 80 faculty were specifically to address, to improve our faculty diversity. So that was the reason. I agree with you that this doesn't look like our past budget request, but that was done, with an intent, given the financial situation that we're all facing right now.
Are there any further questions relative to this?
Mr. Chairman, I have some comments, but not questions.
Yes, sir. Okay. Is it on this faculty point?
No, on the budget generally.
I'd like to, if you please defer that, Trustee Berger.
Go ahead.
I want to ask a follow-up question on the faculty issue. While members of the board who have been around for a while know that we have had some tough experiences with diversity in our faculty. So I see this as an attempt to try to address it, but in addressing it, we've become all too aware of some of the impediments to that. While we seek to set aside 80 positions for diverse faculty, what steps are we taking to address the recruitment of faculty, the rules and norms governing their recruitment and hiring from campus to campus and across the university?
Well,
Anybody?
We're going to turn it over to our provost to respond to that, or the chancellor.
So, Jose Luis, do you want to go? You want me to go?
I'll be happy to. Thank you, Trustee Snider, for the question. You raised a very valid and important point. In the pre-pandemic year, we were able to bring together our campus presidents around an effort that we housed under a faculty diversity working group that looked very carefully at each step of our recruiting process, all the way from how faculty lines are allocated to departments, how we advertise for those, how we ensure that we recruit a diverse pool of faculty from which to interview, and all the way through the final process of making offers. So that's on the recruitment front. So we're able to create some structural strength, if you will, that was not necessarily there in the past, to ensure that the structural component of the process is in place. Many campuses also looked at internal policies that, for example, would allow for search committees in departments that had high levels of underutilization, hence not a lot of diversity, to be diversified by bringing diverse faculty from other departments that could bring that lens into the conversations. We also, in that pre-pandemic year, were able to leverage some funds from the Chancellor's Opportunity Fund for increasing diversity, which allowed us to better compete when we had good, diverse faculty finalists where we were competing with other institutions, not only in terms of salary, but also in terms of startup funds for their research. So that also helped quite a bit. And so now what we're looking to do with these 80 lines that are being requested is to provide further incentives for our colleges to have fixed these structures, if you will, so that they are more focused in ensuring that they are reaching out far and wide to identify the very talented and high quality diverse faculty we know there to exist and attract them to CUNY. And so the funds would allow for sort of a match, if you will, with the campuses, whereby for these 80 faculty lines, the central office could provide up to $75,000 of the starting salary, and then that way free up the campuses to allocate not only the difference in salary, but also have more resources available for startup funds and retention offers that they may have to make to retain the current diverse faculty that we do have that may be recruited to other places.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I'd like to just add to your
Mr.
question.
Chairman.
Just in both complimenting the Chancellor and you, Provost, for the focus in this area. Obviously, it is something that is important and important to CUNY as a whole. I think we'd love to see that broken out and if there are projections, if there's, I mean, I'd just like to see it, you know, and by the way, I do appreciate the work that has gone into this. We'd just love to see it broken out and in writing just so we can fully understand and then start to see some projections of what it might mean. Because it appears as if you looked at this in a very multifaceted way, but would love to see that broken out so we fully understand that.
Okay.
We'll be happy to share the data.
No, and thank you for your work on this. Thank you.
Trustee Berger had a question.
I have some comments on this. I understand that this is a bare bones presentation, but I'm very concerned that by not asking for certain things that we absolutely need, we can get everything we ask for and still be far behind where we need to be. In that regard, I think this is inadequate. So for example, last year, the only state increase we got was for fringe benefits. That was some $26 or $27 million, as I recall. Our fringe benefits continue to go up. I think not having a line in the fiscal year 22 request for fringe benefits from both the state and the city is a mistake. And I would move that we add lines for fringe benefits for both state and city. I have further, you want to do these one at a time or you want me to do all of them at once?
Whichever you prefer. Would anyone like to take a shot at this one?
I have
Matt
one.
or Hector or someone?
Yeah, no, I would repeat what I said in response to Professor Verzani, that again, we were trying to keep this request to be very modest, to be very focused on responding to the pandemic. And so items that we've historically had on the request, we did not include because we did want it to be focused and modest.
My concern, Matt, is that if we don't ask for it, they give us everything we asked for, and we're suddenly $27 million behind that we have to make up out of other resources. And I don't think it's unexpected that this and the other item I have in this area, the mandated increases for collective bargaining and energy and rent and other things, it's exactly the same thing. We ended up being, $60 or $70 million behind this year because we didn't get any money for mandated increases. That's going to happen again. If we don't have them in our budget request, they can say, well, you didn't ask for them, we don't give it to you. And we're well over $100 million behind that we have to make up out of other sources that we simply don't have. So, I would move that we add to the requests for fringe benefits and for mandatory increases.
Any response to that?
I don't want to get ahead of the Chancellor. Chancellor, you want to respond? You want me to respond?
Go ahead.
No, I mean, I think that if Trustee Berger is raising this, I mean, obviously you're the board and you're instructing us to put this on the budget request. We will do what the board is asking us to do. I mean, I think that as Matt alluded to, we had, as we were having conversations, we know that we've heard that our requests needed to be modest, and because of that, we didn't include certain items. But again, the board is, this is why we're presenting to the board, and we make adjustments according to the board's feedback.
Well, can I ask something, Chairman Freer?
Certainly.
See, I mean, look, I agree. I think we should add free tuition also. I mean, I'm serious. I couldn't be more desirous of that and a lot of other things. I mean, and we know what the environment we're working in, and there's no secret about that. This is all really a lobbying decision. And how much can we realistically ask for in this environment that we can get? My gut tells me we should be modest, knowing how insane the fiscal issues are in both the state and the city, and whatever goodies are coming from Washington, it's still very unclear what they are. We're obviously more pessimistic than we were before the election, but I don't know that we should start adding things at this point. We could also revisit this as things play out, but I don't have enough information about what's going on or not going on in Albany particularly to agree with Trustee Berger. I would like to, but I'm not prepared to do that yet.
And let me add to that also. I mean, I would love to see lots more money for CUNY. But it is in the fiscal desert that we're all in right now. I'd like to see that, the requests that we make, that we can really get them. I just don't want to turn it into, I mean, and Henry, I agree with you. I would love to see lots more, but I'd like to keep our fiscal request realistic this year, given the last 12 months have just been nightmarish for all of us, and nightmarish for CUNY, and an incredibly difficult situation for cities and states in New York and as well as around the country. So I'd like to keep, I agree with Ken in this one. I'd like to put in as realistic a request as we can, and to work hard to get those student-focused and COVID-focused dollars right now. That tends to be the priority.
Trustee Piquant has a comment.
Go right ahead.
I think to Trustee Berger's point, I agree with Trustee Berger. I think that budget requests and just documents a budget is a moral document. And I think that what we're asking for sets the agenda. It's our tool the institution's using to lobby, and this is what we're asking for. And I do think that we understand we're in uncharted waters, when uncertain times. Things are changing in Albany, things are changing in DC. But I do think that we need to be a bit more adequate and wholesome in what exactly we are asking for. And I have a question in regards to the predictable tuition policy. I just want to understand, because we do know the governor obviously is in favor of increasing tuition at SUNY and CUNY. I want to understand our institution's stance. Are we committing to not increasing tuition, or is that not going to happen? Are we talking about, well, let's strategically create a policy in place? Because I think we're here because of the TAP gap, and we're here because of all these things. We cannot keep balancing the budget on the backs of students. These students cannot afford any increases. And I think it needs to be very clear and concise. And I just want to kind of understand the predictable tuition policy framework. Elaborate on that and help me understand our stance as an institution on that.
So can I address that one?
Please, Chancellor.
So my understanding is that this document asks for the flexibility to be able to do this in terms of raising tuition or not, that it is a tool that in this case, the governor is proposing, and if it gets approved, the state will give us to be able to make our own determinations as a board as to what kind of decision we want to make. I always like to remind people, I'm a historian, that the fact that Cuny has had that authority over the past 4 years has not meant that Cuny has always used it. Last year, we had the authority to do it. We did not do it. We didn't do it because we understood the situation that our students were facing. In the past, there's been times in which we have not raised the community college tuition, right? So the fact that that authority, that flexibility is in the budget or in the law is a tool that we have as a university, and it will depend on the circumstances on the ground. If in 2 years the Biden administration gives money to the states to make 2 years and 4 year schools free, it'd be a different scenario, right? So I think that what we're calling for here, and this is why we're supportive, is an additional tool that I think this board has used responsibly in the past, not using it all the time, but combining it with savings, with additional revenue to support the bottom line of the work that we do. So that'd be my take on the proposed rational tuition policy being extended.
Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard on this? Now, just to be clear, this isn't a budget item calling for a specific tuition increase, right?
Absolutely.
Some clarity is required here. If we're talking about something that has existed in years past, you know, it's not unreasonable to say we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, but we have a very good record of not being irresponsible in these matters. Anyone else?
I'd just like to add my support for Trustee Berger's proposal to add in the contractual increases and the fringe benefit increases. The lack of that funding at the senior colleges has led to like a 2% decline in revenues for the last several years, and it's a palpable feeling on the campuses. And I feel it would be remiss not to ask. I don't expect to get, but I think not asking is a strategic mistake.
Yeah. The goal here is really not to add something. This is as much a policy document as a financial document. And the goal here is to say, we want to maintain the programs and what we have. We don't want to, you know, we're not asking for anything additional. We just need to maintain this amount in order not to have to cut other programs.
Chancellor?
Yes.
Do you have a view on this?
I mean, again, we made a strategic decision to go with a document that reflected needs that are very associated with the moment that we're living, that is responsible in terms of our funding partners, understanding some of the challenges that they face, that it has the best challenge of success. As we know, the budget request is the beginning of the budget process that has many players and goes through the through between now and the end of April. And I think that this budget gives us the best shot at getting as high level of resources as we can, given the circumstances that the state and the city face. But also at the end of the day, the decision of what to include is a board decision. And we'll clearly abide by that.
Anybody wish to add anything to this?
I will just stay with I'd prefer that, I mean, if we're coming to a vote on this, I'm going to vote to at least keep this request this year, this strange year, while we're still scrambling and trying to work and do a dozen other different things. Keep it to make this not just I'm never against getting additional money, but we need to be realistic. And as I said, this year is, we're trying to survive this year. And so that's where I'm going to vote. I'm making a statement.
Are we ready to move to the capital part of the budget?
Are we going to take a vote on this, Mr. Chairman?
Did you make a motion?
I did.
Oh, I'm sorry. And then a motion has been made. And your specific motion was again?
To add a line for fringe benefits, city and state, and a line for mandated increases.
I beg your pardon. Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on this motion? I am personally inclined to agree with, before I call for the vote, to agree with the Chancellor and the Chair that this is a preliminary document, not unsympathetic to the idea that money's got to come from somewhere. And I presume that this conversation is something that people will take note of on the city side and on the state side, because you can't keep adding things to a budget and then watching you bleed 2% of personal services or 1% of something else. That's not a sustainable budget strategy. So, but I'm inclined to agree with the Chancellor and the Chair to maintain this request now, knowing it is only a request and a starting point in the longer conversation and much more difficult conversation about the budget. But that's only my view. Are we ready to take a vote? Okay, please only respond if you're voting negative or if you're voting to abstain.
Negative.
Now this is a vote we're on the
amendment, right?
So
On
is
the
it,
amendment.
we're voting to add the amendment, or we're voting yes or no on the amendment?
Voting to add a provision in the amendment that would allow for requesting additional funds for fringe benefits. Is that a correct restatement of your motion, Trustee Berger?
Fringe benefits and mandated increases.
And mandated increases.
All right, I will vote no on the amendment.
Okay. So will I. Knowing that, of course, that we have another bite at this apple in
Exactly.
a couple of months.
Exactly.
So, as anybody, so these are all, so those are no's, and anyone else a no?
This is Robert Mujica, no on the amendment.
Great. Okay, so you have 4 votes.
Okay.
So
Anyone
your
else? Okay. How do we stack up?
So your
Secretary?
amendment does not prevail.
Okay.
It fails.
But we'll have a second bite at this apple in a short period of time in any case. And I think the point has merit. It should not be, I wouldn't want my vote to be construed as, I don't ever want to hear this again.
No, and I think and none of our votes should be construed as we don't want additional resources for CUNY.
Right.
I concur with that.
Okay, are we ready to go?
Clarification on the expense budget. On
Trustee Berger.
On community college revenues, I understand that we've asked the state to freeze their funding at the 2021 enacted levels, which means that even though enrollment has gone down, they will pay the same dollar amount. I don't understand from this whether we are asking the city to maintain the amount they provided last year for the community colleges, even though enrollment and tuition have gone down, or whether they're asking for an additional $23.8 million beyond what was provided last year.
Well, what we're looking for here is and on the chart, we describe it as community college revenue relief. So part of the budget that we receive from the city of New York includes a revenue target for us that we have to generate a certain amount of revenues, $300 and something million, in order to maintain our total budget. If we don't meet that revenue, then we have to cut expenditures so that revenues and expenditures balance. Community college enrollment took a big hit this as a result of the pandemic, down over 14%. And so what we're asking for is revenue relief to essentially bring that revenue target down to something that is closer to what our actual post-pandemic enrollment is, so that we don't have to cut expenditures. So yes, I mean, we're looking for support from the city to do that, to bring our revenue target down by $23.8 million and maintain our total operating budget at the same level. But give us that revenue relief so that our colleges have a more realistic target to hit to and won't have to do additional cuts.
Did we receive $23.8 million less in the current fiscal year because we didn't meet enrollment and revenue targets?
Yes, the city technically didn't cut our budget by 23.8 million, but because our revenues are lowered by 23.8, we have to, if we don't reduce expenses, we're going to overspend our budget because the city's expecting that money to come in as revenue and it's not going to. So, so yes, I mean, we have 23.8 million less available to our community colleges as a result of enrollment losses than we did at the beginning of the fiscal year.
Thank you for the clarification.
And there is a provision in this budget request that would seek to offset that loss in the fiscal year going forward?
Correct, correct. In fiscal year
For the sake
22.
of clarity.
Yes, no, thank you, Chair. We would look to have that offset for fiscal year 22.
Anyone else on the operating budget? Are we ready to move to the capital budget?
We
Okay,
are.
let's do that. I'm sorry?
No, I'm saying we are.
Okay, let's do it.
The capital budget program mission is to provide and maintain facilities and support the university's strategic plan goals. We are committed to helping our students, faculty, do their best work in healthy and safe environment. One of the issues shaping our capital budget program is the age of our facilities. The condition of our inventory of the 300 buildings that we have over these years have really, in some cases, deteriorated. Some of it is connected to the age of our buildings. As you can see, of the 14 million square feet that we have, most of them were built before 1960, which makes them over 50 years old. So that means that our inventory is at least 50% of it, it's at least 50 years old. CUNY will continue to make sure that our facilities are upgraded and our facilities infrastructure equipment is upgraded. We will also complete ongoing partial funding projects such as the multi-phase renovation at 17 Lex, where the Chancellor yesterday attended a virtual ribbon cutting ceremony with the Lieutenant Governor. One of the things that this pandemic has shown us is the importance of critical maintenance. We need to continue to make sure that we're upgrading our facilities and make sure that we're continuing to pay attention. We've had to spend a lot of time really focused on upgrading our ventilation system and making sure that we have the appropriate systems in place. We've also began to really focus on upgrading our technology. As the board knows, we recently presented our vision for the next phase of technology, which is cloud-based solution. We're now requesting to begin that effort in this budget request. Finally, we have projects to meet energy conservation and performance objectives. We've allocated resources to focus on Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, Bill Smart 2025, and Local Law 87. Again, these capital requests are modest. They really are focused on the key on areas that we think we need to continue to pay attention to, and areas that we learn as because of the pandemic, really focus on making sure that our ventilation systems are really meeting the standard that needs to be met because of the pandemic. So now I want to turn it over to Matt to walk you through some of the numbers.
Thank you. So to look at the numbers that are contained in our capital request, our first year request, we have three main items that we're looking for funding for. $242 million for capital infrastructure and equipment in our senior colleges, $75 million for next generation academic IT systems, and $50 million for a science lab upgrade. So to go into each of those three items, capital infrastructure and equipment, again, we were very focused on the response to COVID-19. We know that we always have capital renewal programs, but we are now including new criteria that will improve indoor air quality for our buildings, as our Chief Operating Officer said. Installing more efficient air filters, installing UVC lighting, increasing ventilations, and installing more advanced building maintenance systems as well. The next item, $75 million for next generation academic administrative systems. Several meetings ago, this committee, Board Fiscal Committee, we did a presentation to talk about our plans for enhancing our current IT systems, moving to cloud-based systems. We know that IT solutions are changing at a very quick pace and that we need new technologies. And so all of you were able to participate in that discussion. And so we're seeking $75 million as the first phase to try to get that project underway and enhance our IT systems and have our ability to adapt to fast changing technology and bring better solutions to our students and our faculty and staff. And then last item, science lab upgrades. We're asking for $50 million. And again, here it's focused on COVID. We know that our science labs are in need of upgrades in general, but certainly, we have been successful through our capital program in improving a lot of the science labs we have, but there are still so many that we have the technology that's in the lab, the equipment that's in the lab is well more than 30 years old. And so our students and our faculty that are participating in those labs severely need upgrades. And so we're seeking that as well. That's the end of our presentation. Again, happy to take any questions on the capital request as well.
Questions or comments on the capital part of this request? Anyone? Well, I do that. The IT part of this, I presume, is consistent with the recommendations that have been made by our consultant that we've been briefed on.
Mm-hmm.
Is that true, one, and is that true, two, in every aspect of this proposal?
The answer to that, go ahead, Matt.
No, I was going to say yes, Mr. Chairman, it is true. That was our guidepost for developing this request, and the number that's contained in the request is consistent with what our Gartner Consulting had included in their presentation to this committee.
Okay. Anyone else? I have an additional question. I presume as we are looking toward renewal of facilities, we have a great many, being an urban campus, elevators and escalators. Are we closer to developing a policy on strict avoidance of proprietary software being built and designed in elevators and escalators? And are we looking toward, further down the road, maintenance agreements that reflect that same desire?
So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for raising that. We, as I mentioned in previous conversations, we're right now in the process of hiring a vice chancellor for facilities. One of the mandates of that vice chancellor of facilities is to put together a plan to address the very important points that you have raised connected to elevators. We will be coming back to do such a presentation and show you the new protocols that we have put in place. But at this point, we are having internal conversations, but I really, when we hire the new expert in facilities, I want to make sure that I have the thought leadership there to be able to come up with the best plan forward. But we understand the importance of this. Absolutely.
Okay. Is there anyone else?
Yes,
Yes.
thank you. So a question on sustainability and the climate crisis, because many students have expressed concern to us at USS around how sustainable CUNY is being in terms of upgrades of facilities and taking into account how different buildings and the upgrades of buildings will affect the environment and the climate. And many students are asking about doing environmental reports of what buildings are contributing to the climate crisis and so forth, on just making sure that we understand CUNY's environmental impact, especially like you said, we have so many buildings, a lot that are older and will be having upgrades. So I'm wondering if there's considerations of sustainability in mind as we're making those plans for upgrades.
Yeah, this is a very important initiative for the Chancellor. And so we're in the, we have a division that's sort of focused on that area. And part of every project going forward, that gets taken into consideration, and definitely all new construction. But I think that one of the things I would love to do is be able to come to the facilities committee of the board and really present what our plan is. I think it'll be important for the board to sort of hear the different things that we're doing. We're also, in some ways, maximizing and taking advantage of some grants that we have gotten from not only the state, but from the city. And those grants have been extremely helpful in making sure that our campus continue to make an impact in this area. We also are having sort of conversations connected to some of our parking lots that are not even being considered for future development opportunities, see how we could bring solar panels in there. So there's a lot of work that's being done. But I think to have a fragmented conversation it'd be helpful to be able to present something that so you could see kind of the sort of the bigger picture and what impact we're having as a university.
And may I add, and thank you, Hector, for that very comprehensive answer, but to Alexis and Giovanni too, as you know, I mean, the entire team here is extremely attuned to listen to what the student feedback might be. So I would also invite, your colleagues and you, maybe, have a conversation with Hector and his team and get a sense of what are some of the ideas that you might have, some of the proposals, because it might be that we're already doing things and we just need to maybe communicate that better or improve, or there might be some things that we're really not doing, and as a result of your feedback, we need to incorporate, and we'd love to listen to those suggestions.
Thank you, Chancellor. We will definitely take you up on that recommendation.
Okay. Are we ready then for a vote on the resolution? Does anyone wish a reading of the resolution? Is that a yes or a no? Or abstain?
Moving right along.
Okay. Then we'll go for a vote. Please only vote if you are voting no or abstaining. And identify yourself.
No.
Trustee Berger, no.
Abstain.
I'm sorry,
Sorry.
Student Representative Alexis Fisher, abstaining.
Ms. Fisher abstains. Anyone else? The motion is carried, and that is a resolution to authorize a budget request. Bear in mind, this is a request. The main event comes in a couple of months or less when we talk about the actual budget, and that's when all of these issues will be fleshed out in 3D detail. If there's nothing else, this resolution is approved. If there's nothing else, a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor? We're adjourned. Thank you very much.